It's rolling. Okay. Can I get you to say your name and spell it?
Sure, Greg McAndrews. I gotta spell my name?
Nah,
I mean, people haven't gotten degrees back there at Bedeswinger. They can't spell anything. McAndrews.
And what was your PIN number?
418.
418. Bedesig 418.
Yeah, fall of '63.
That was your pledge?
Yes, it was.
And you graduated in what year?
67.
67. So you did rush as a freshman, right?
I did. I came out of Notre Dame High School out in Sherman Oaks. Out of a class of 210, 28 people went to USC, most of them on scholarships, like myself, academic scholarships. And interestingly enough, if you look back in history from 1945, when most of us were born during that summer, we were the first grade school and high school and college entrance class. So it was the first of a wave of male freshmen since the end of World War II. Something that was significant that we really didn't understand, and it's only come to light, I would say, about now. And since we went to an all-boys school, we entered USC as academic, wizards. We weren't quite sure how we would fit in to what was a jock school. And many of the guys that came over were jocks. I was a professional bowler at the time, so I was precluded from under the rules from being a football player. The fact that I was 6'1" at the time, weighed 129 pounds, may have been a negative, but since I was precluded from trying out, I never know.
Now, what do you remember most about your pledge semester? What sticks out the most?
Well, I was determined to make a break from the past, and while I did well in high school, I didn't feel very comfortable. And I found I rushed what would be called the small houses now, not being coming from a wealthy family. I found an acceptance, an ability to allow someone to blossom, and believe me, I need a lot of blossoming at 18 years old, and a willingness to nurture somebody that was going to be something better than what they were at that particular time in life, which, by the way, although I'm a Greek god at this time, the potential was not apparent to very many people when I was 18 years old, that's for sure. And I felt it from the very beginning. Teak had just come out of a period where they had older guys in the house that were politicians. I was attracted to this mentality, but when the pledging was over with, we realized that they were going out and we were the next generation, and there was no filling in from seniors to freshmen at the time, much to our shock. So one of my pledge brothers became president of the house at the end of the sophomore year, which is hard to believe, impossible to comprehend, but a necessity at the time. And Jim Robertson gave us some great leadership, although he would admit himself he was a sophomore, and mistakes as one could make. But I think that our pledge class, since there was no fallback position at that time, we gave the best support we can, and became a political powerhouse a mere 2 years later.
So you said the class before you
make, but I think that our pledge class, since there was no fallback position at that time, we gave the best support we can, and became a political powerhouse a mere 2 years later.
So you said the class before you, the seniors, when you came in, were all politicians. What were you guys? How would you define?
Well, in 3 words, we were the political powerhouse. A legacy that we were given, but when we were given it, we had nothing. As things go, a university is a generation in 4 years. So familial generations go on in 20-year spans. But at USC or any other school, the turnover is in 4 years. It's hard to grasp. Of course, I didn't grasp that at the time, but it was pretty apparent that the leadership was getting married and not with us anymore 6 months after we graduated, and we were active and bewildered. I would say I hate to say betrayed, but abandoned for sure. We did not, as an 18-year-old, and many of us were 17 when we pledged, not aware of what was going to happen, looking for leadership. The leadership was still there. John Sauer, John, several of the other people were there, but they were there and not there. They were not living in the environment that we wanted to create. So we just said, well, we have to do it ourselves.
Huh. That's good. Now, just going off that, how would you describe, as you were in the house, how would you describe the Brotherhood?
Well, we were in a rebuilding mode from the mid-'50s when we were, very diversified in songfest and politics, so forth. There was this gap from, I would say, 59 to 63. As I look back, as I look back, I see now in retrospective what happened, and I will say our if you will, the Deus Machina was Mike Robinson, who had gone into the Army and come back and ran for president as like a 23-year-old guy. Seemed like he was 30 to us. We were very relieved to have some, if you will, adult or senior leadership after Jim Robinson, filled in the gap, if you will. And we really grew. I will tell you the key story of TKE. There would be no real chapter here at all if Mike Robinson and John Schmidt and myself, 3 guys, had not spent the entire summer pledging 26 people. And the first lineup, we had to bring in the guys that had graduated but were still hanging around just so that there would be more. The attrition was worse than we thought. We thought it would be bad. We came back with 13 actives.
Wow.
3 guys pledged 26 guys, and we had 13 people. Well, we were still outnumbered. So we had to keep yelling at the pledges to keep their eyes straight so they wouldn't look around and see there was only 24 guys, interrogating 26 guys. Without that, there would have been a discontinuation, if you will, of the longevity of the chapter. And then after that, we had the period in the 70s where the same sort of stamina of dedicated people had to regenerate the fraternity. But I will say, other than Phi Delta Theta, I believe TKE is the only one that's been on campus continuously and not recolonized, been suspended, or otherwise, off campus.
Huh. Now, going off what you said earlier, just when you started that out, Songfest. Do you have any memories of Songfest?
Well, since we were so undermanned, which the other people on the road didn't know, and we made great pains to disguise, we went into small group when we had been in the with all the big sororities. We had the songwriters and the scenarists to win all the trophies. We the story that we're going in a small group to do something different. The fact is, a lot of guys, and again, we went in with a very different type of presentation. It was only 3 guys: Jim Robinson, John Deacon, and Marcia Johnson. And they stole the show with a 3-man. They came out dressed up in little paper hats and big swords and a kiddies outfit, and they sang Smothers Brothers tune. I talked to the trees. They did silly children's things, and they swept everything. We didn't win the sweepstakes because it was so different from the big groups.
Yeah.
But I think that we established that we're going to do things different. We're going to do things our way. And by the way, that spring, we really lived up to the political powerhouse because we were, not knowing it, 16 people in the House out of what was 32 ran, and none of us told each other we were running in the preliminaries because we didn't want to lose and then, have every say we lost. Everyone won the primaries. We saw our names in the paper and said, I didn't know you were running, I didn't know you were running, I didn't know you were running. So then we got together, every single one, we were 16 for 16 winning the final position. And I would say that was a turning point in my young life because I won from the School of Journalism, I became chairman of the Student Senate, and I would think no one would remember except Rob Cattell, who was a senior, and Carl Holm was a senior. I made them present a bill to have cheerleaders, girl cheerleaders at USC, because they were seniors and they couldn't have out of school or the scholarship taken away. I was just a junior and I was still on scholarship. The vote passed. I went to the president of the university who called me in, Mr. Hubbard, and he said, we can't have this. I said, it's the will of the people. He intimated that the university was a private university and they had control over who attended there. I said, well, the guys who brought up are seniors, they already graduated. I'm voting for the will of the people, what do you want me to do? He pointed out that cheerleaders were, women cheerleaders were specifically cut out because of Asa V. Call, who was a trustee. He gave a big endowment. To make a long story short, I said, call them something else. Call them Cardinal Girls. Call them, I don't know, song leaders. Call them anything. Asa V. Call happened to die in July and beginning of August of that summer. We had song girls that fall. Like a typical politician, I'll take credit for everything. If Asa V. Call hadn't died, I don't know.
That's good. So you guys are very involved on campus, probably.
Every single band had something to do on campus. Every single person. Either the Daily Trojan, Songfest, Trolios in those days. There wasn't, in those years, 30 to 40 people, there wasn't one person that wasn't president or vice president of something, if not two things.
And you talked about the school then being a big jock school. Did you guys have any athletes in the house that played varsity sports?
No. In short, no, we had Barry Marks was a tennis player, but no, that was Phi Psi, Sigma Chi, Phi Delta was sort of the people that were somewhat intellectually enabled, and I admired them quite a bit, but they had a lot of legacy standards at that time, and maybe still do, but there were hurdles that I was not, didn't feel comfortable overcoming. But I had a lot of respect for Phi Delta and still do, but it was not the fraternity for me. It's, in retrospect, these many years later, there was no other house but Teak for me.
But you guys, you didn't have any, obviously, any football players or anything like that. But
No, we were lucky to finish in the top 10 as a small house. In those days, it was big house and small house, even though we eventually had more than 40 members and would be, we were always the 8th to 10th biggest house. We were considered a small house because we were late on campus in 1948. And so while there was a big house was Kappa Sigma that never had more than 20 people, but Frank Gifford went there. And the other Nelson brother, the older Nelson, Ricky Nelson's older brother went there, and they were a big house all the time. But we kicked their ass as a smaller house, so we were the biggest people in the small house category, and we be put in the big house category with people like Tom Selleck, whose shirt I'm wearing, and John Zazzaro, who's playing basketball, and he's sitting there playing softball because it wasn't his sport. So we would be lucky to finish in the top 10, and we felt very good about that because we wiped them out in other categories. So I would say the biggest change is Teak being number one in Ironman, these whatever it is, 6 out of the last 10 years, is the biggest shocking change that I have seen, and I give credit to, I've forgotten his name now, but I give credit to
David, or
I have to fill in the name here. I've forgotten his name right at the moment. who continued that tradition and stretched it to make it something that was important. And to us, it was important to finish up with the big houses, and we were lucky to do it. I mean, we'd be playing with guys in the spring that had played varsity football in the fall. And believe me, when you're 130, 140 pounds, going against for Sigma Chi House, the guy that was the tailback in the president, I can't think of his name right now. Or I remember going head to head with Grady, Sigma Chi. He finished his eligibility, and we went up against him. Football wasn't an IFC sport at the time. You just challenged people that instead of fighting, you challenged them football. So we were on a big roll. We were becoming what we are right now. It was 67, and we were not a jock house, so we would challenge the big houses. And what they would do, they wouldn't send their first team out, and we were beating them. We were 9-0 against the people we played Sigma Chi, and they had found out that we were beating these other people. So they sent their big guys out, and I went up to Grady, and my head's still ringing. I think it was up to about 140 pounds right then. I hit him head on. He was 5'10", about 230 or something like that. I'm sure under this shirt, I got cleat marks still sitting there.
Yeah. Now, it would seem most likely that during the early to mid '60s would be the first chance for real alumni involvement in the house. Well, the alumni base was getting.
There was an alumni association, but the first people in the house were not all. Many of them were World War II veterans, and so they were ostracized and belittled. But they became the first political powerhouse. Not the first, the ones that weren't the big house. The big houses were what was called TRG, Trojan for Representative Government. Mm-hmm. The small house were called TNE, Theta Nu Epsilon, which is, traditionally across the country, the small groups against the big guys. Mm-hmm. So we dominated that before I came to the house, and then lost that domination in the late 50s. Backlash kind of hurt us. And I felt I led a resurgence into that area without being under the domination, if you will, of the group. Mm-hmm. We were big enough to operate independently. We cooperated with both sides. We became the Henry Kissinger, if you will. And I felt that made us make our mark. Obviously, the guys in the house were behind us at the time, and stuck with the program. Later on, there became a disaffection with that because of the tearing apart effect that politics normally does, and I believe we got out of that role for probably a couple of decades. I don't think we're back in that. I think we've chosen another route, and I'm not so sure that's wrong. It was right at the time. I'm not so sure it's right now.
Well, I guess my next question has been given. Socially, how would you remember your take? Just having fun stories.
Well, at the time there was a social stratification that was impenetrable. The stories were dominated by women from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And there was a stratification that no matter how well you were doing, it was a Miami triad was at the top, and everybody else was fighting for everything else. However, it is indisputable fact that the pill became widespread in the summer of '64, and so in the fall of '65, all of the sororities, being made up of mostly rich girls, had got their prescriptions, and all hell broke loose on the sexual front. Now, USC, being a conservative school, was certainly not in the forefront of Berkeley with the free speech movement and all that. However, it hit with a vengeance. Normal-looking guys were getting laid all of a sudden without being pinned. This cannot really be overemphasized. It was a cataclysmic change overnight. Normal guys became a commodity because there's less sororities than there are fraternities. And it was a revolutionary change. I wrote several articles in Daily Trojan. I will say very timid in these respects at the time. Senior women did not get married automatically in June. Sorority girls dated younger guys, unheard of. It was guys went into from 60 after that year went to either graduate school or into a National Guard to avoid the war, unheard of before since World War II. In that 2-year period, which would be a half of a generation in real life, cataclysmic changes. And our fraternity fortunately capitalized on that, and we did much better socially because we were guys already not constructed by social strata. By definition, we were teaks. We were not recruited or not pledged by the traditionally older fraternities. So we were there, and we capitalized more than the other. We capitalized on their loss, if you will. And I would say the sorority system became better off because they were freed from regimented categorization of who you could date. Hard to believe today, I'm quite sure.
Yeah, very hard.
But nevertheless, it's quite the truth. For my senior thesis, I wrote 2 of them instead of 1. One was I covered every political campaign since 1988 at USC up until 1966. I also, as a minor thing, covered every social column from 1988 to 1965. I think that I can speak authoritatively on this.
Yeah. Now, when I was doing my research for this interview, and also the one I had with Jerry Murphy on Friday.
Who was that?
Jerry Murphy.
I don't remember him.
He graduated in '64, I think.
Just teasing.
I was looking around through scrapbooks and records and whatnot.
Right.
There's not many pictures or documentation from, say, 60 until about 72, 71
Right.
or 72. Do you have any?
Well,
type
the
of
unfortunate
explanation?
truth of that is that there was a period at that time when I remember it crystal clear. I was going down to collect some suits from Silverwoods, which is on campus at the time.
Can you hold 1 second? All right. Actually, can I get you to give me your thoughts on Jerry Nagley one more time?
Despite the fact that that I shouldn't apologize to Jerry Nagley, who I was referring to before as the really architect of bringing Teak from it's good to finish in the top 10 and make a good showing because we have other attributes to if we can finish in the top 10, we can win the whole damn thing, which no one believes of Jerry Nagley. Now, while Jerry got himself in trouble many times, as I have, and Teak generally being tolerant, as I've indicated before, I give full credit to us finishing as the Ironman winner. Unbelievable, incomprehensible in the 60s and 70s. Full credit to him engendering that will to win from people that had the potential to win but didn't believe they could. He changed that to we want to the we can, and here's the plan, and here's how you do it, and it's going to take a long time to achieve this objective. And as anyone knows, it is much harder to get to the top than it is to stay there. And Teak astounds me today. I thought they'd hit the peak and come down, as we have at many times, always rising to a higher level. I say again, at this 50th anniversary, it is tougher to get to the top than stay there. And I am pleased that the more impossible task of keeping that level at the top has been attained at least for the last 10 years. And so my hat's off to Jerry in this one small area. In the other 90% of his life, he's a complete screw-up, of course.
Now, okay, back to what happened with all the records
Yes.
in the 60s.
There was a group of people that were disaffected and felt that being individuals was more important than being with the group, and there is a temperance that is required. And so I was driving down, looking at the house, going to pick up some suits at Silverwoods at the time, and I noticed that windows were being broken. Now, this wasn't unusual, except I noticed that the windows were being broken from the inside out. So I stopped the car in the middle of 28th, ran up the steps, came in. There was a guy in the living room that was cutting cocaine with a GI big bayonet in the living room. And I said, "What's going on upstairs?" And he said, two particular guys' names were out of control. I lost my temper, kicked over the table, ran up the stairs, went in the room, and there was a guy with a bat and a barbell for lifting weights with just the barbell. At the time, I still weighed about 162 pounds, but I was so outraged that the legacy of Teak had been brought down to this. It had been building for a while, of course, that I grabbed both of these much bigger guys and said, "You're out, we're putting your stuff on the back step, and you're coming down." Halfway down the steps, I realized they still had the bat and the barbells in their hands. They could just turn them on me, but I looked in their eyes, and their eyes were literally spinning around. They were completely out of it. It had gone too far. The liberalism of using drugs in the house had reached its limit that day. So these people stole the scroll. I believe the word is that they're holding it until T comes up to the level they thought it is, but I believe it's been destroyed. And I appeal to Jerry Nagley, who I think knows the truth. This 50th anniversary to make
Come on, take your time.
to make things right.
You're fine.
I think you'll find a lot of emotionalism from people in the 40s and 50s and 60s. As they get older, they look back and realize what seemed to be a lark at the time was an indelible mark on the soul that doesn't go away. I think you'll find this when you get to be an old fart like me. You have a few years to go, though.
If you can think of one specific song that brings up a very fond memory when you're an active member.
Well, I'm particularly upset that the rowdy songs within political words are lost from memory. I appeal to Everett Miller and Amos Travis and people that had that sort of archival type of mentality that wrote these things out, to look through and find them again. They're politically or incorrect right now. However, they show, I think, a mentality of what an 18-year-old was in 1960, a freedom of expression, an ability to laugh at bawdy words, and men and women alike time to be able to laugh at what is something of the human event. So my favorite songs have a lot of bad words in them. I would say that anything from the Hot Nuts are my favorite. You don't even know who the Hot Nuts are, do you?
Probably no.
How little the youth knows of today. Well, I promise you that during this season I'll get some people together and we will sing at least one Hot Nuts rendition at every game with the original words intact. I would say that, if this is I'm not going to sing anything.
All right, 30 seconds left.
Yes.
Tough question, but what single thing that you gained from being a teak do you cherish the most?
Well, at the time, it would be different what I say now. What I say now is the forbearance of my fraternity brothers, the ability of 98% of them to allow me to be an individual within the context of the group. To the 2% that found it intolerable, I hereby give apologies, because it certainly was. Whatever I did to offend people was certainly outrageous. However, I did take away 4 years of comradeship. Not everything I did was right. I can't say that I was the most loved teak in the world, but I never did anything that I didn't think was in the best interest of the house, however misguided it might be. And they allowed me to do that. Now, I did live in the annex, which was no longer there behind the house, which was reserved for seniors, and I was allowed to live there in a single room after my freshman year. And I think that says volumes for the tolerance of the people in the house at the time.
Great. Okay, I think yeah.
Would you like a cigar? They're Cuban.
That might have gotten on there.